let's start up. Yep. So I'm going to call the official meeting to order at 8:14. So let's do a pledge. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, come on in, everybody. Okay, so we completed our workshop meeting. We're starting our council meeting. Let me do a quick roll call. As I noted before in the workshop, attending in person are Molly, Jeff, Amber, and Dan, and Lee. Paloma, are you with us online?
Yes, can you hear me currently?
Yep, we can hear you.
Very loud.
And then, yeah, you might want to turn that up. And then Pam is on vacation and excused. And we've got the city attorney and the city administrator here as well.
Grab the sign-in sheet.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
So the first thing on our agenda is public comments. There's going to be two sorts of public comments, so just let me help you clarify. So if you want to speak on one of two topics of a public hearing, so there's going to be a public hearing on a local law concerning eviction requirements, and there's also going to be a hearing on a proposed minimum parking requirement. So if you're here to speak on either of those, do wait until those hearings start up. Otherwise, if you'd like to make a general public comment, you certainly can. You have up to 3 minutes on any topic you like, and I'll read down the list of those who are here and have signed in. After we get to the folks that have signed in for a public comment, we'll certainly allow anyone else as well. Okay. So the first one that isn't on one of those two topics is Clark Gedman.
Clark Gedman, 2 Wilson Street. Dan, I thought your comments on this commercial issue in residential housing was right on spot, with the note that the assessment increases the tax collection the more viable the commercial activity as opposed to the residential component. So there is also long-term tax benefits in addition to community employment. And the idea that you should surrender to the wisdom of the planning board would be misguided and just kind of like burying the pea under the thimble in terms of public awareness. I'd like to, on a positive note that in the late 2 centuries ago, the water runoff, Mount Beacon, was described to be rather directed along towards down by Craig House and whatever. In my part of Beacon, up Wilson Street, and Jensen Pond was not existing in terms of feeding the Fishkill Creek. I presented that map several council meetings. And like for 18 years, I've been fighting with the water coming in my land illegally without a deed restriction. And then all of a sudden, like an act of God, the last rainstorm, there was no water. And then I said, well, let me drive over to Jensen Pond, see what's going on there. And I see weeds. Now, the last I knew, the county had designated that body of water as being polluted in county reports. And so I'm totally dumbfounded as to what happened to the water and how it got redirected in such a miraculous way. And I'm kind of in a bad situation, and so I kind of like caught, and I definitely have to do some major litigation real soon, Nick. And I would really be aided if you can kind of explain that part to me kind of informally. Maybe if we could chat, we can avoid, a misunderstanding. Because if you have that power to make something like that happen, because it couldn't have been God. So I would love to know, the plans and how it happened and whether or not we can expect it to continue. Because that would be a very welcome event that the illegal impoundment of my land to water without a legal basis to do so is a very un-American thing. And my voice, there's a riddle to this whole thing. My voice
15 seconds.
is directly related to all this, result of an assault of a city. Well, we'll get to that some other day. But I thank you for this act of God.
Thank
Your
you.
time is lapsed.
Next on the list for general comment is Joan Miskell.
My name is Joan Miskell, past regent, Milzinga chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, and chair of Beacon's Veteran Banners Project. I reside in Beacon's 4th Ward. We are here this evening to clear up some confusion about who runs the banner program in the city. It is managed by the Veteran Banners Project Committee, composed of all volunteers, not the City of Beacon. The Veteran Banners Project was initiated in 2021 by the Milzinga chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, who invited local representatives from the American Legion, Veterans of Foreign Wars, Marine Corps League, and Elks Lodge to join our mission to honor Beacon's veterans with the banner program. We have enjoyed a wonderful working relationship over the past several years. We would not have been able to have a successful program without the backing of the City of Beacon. We appreciate the city's support, with particular thanks to Mayor Kiriakou, City Administrator Chris White, Highway Superintendent Mickey Manzi, and staff Dave Way and Sean DeToro for installing the banners. Thousands of volunteer hours worked by just a handful of people have gone into making the program a success since its inception. Locating and marking the poles and receiving approvals from Central Hudson, holding committee meetings and meetings with the city administrator to discuss and sign off on all pole locations, communicating frequently with prospective family sponsors to gather information, obtain photos, many that needed to be refined and retouched with a computer program in order to be acceptable for a banner, final approvals, etc. Preparing spreadsheets, collecting payments, and managing funds, and working with a vendor. The committee has received many compliments from families and veterans over the years, which has given us much joy that the program has been worthwhile. Our committee is satisfied with our program's straightforward process. We spoke with other communities that had a banner program up and running when we were establishing ours. So we know there are differences in each community and in their programs. They cannot and should not be compared with one another. We are working cooperatively with city officials to raise
15
all the
seconds.
banners so that none will have to be in storage during the next session. And we agree with the city council to cap the program once all banners that have already been purchased for the 2021-2024 seasons can be raised next year.
Your time is lapsed.
If you can just wrap
Those
up.
who expressed concerns about banners being placed in storage do not represent Beacon's Veteran Banners Project or local veteran groups. We sincerely hope they will be patient while we work with the city to make it happen in 2025.
Thank you. Next is John McEnroe. Just let us know who you are, where you live. Let us know who you are, where you live. Thank you, John.
Hi, I'm John McEnroe. I live at 8 Roman Road, and I represent the Veterans Memorial Building at 413 Main Street. I spent 25 years in the uniform of the United States, and as such, I'm a big fan of people that stand up and volunteer and contribute to the society. We are politically probably not in agreement in a lot of stuff, the council and me. I see myself as a Buckley-like conservative. You guys are a little bit more progressive than I am. but you stood up and you raised your hands and said, I want to do something decent for the city of Beacon. The committee that I joined under Joan's leadership also stood up and said, I want to do something decent for the city of Beacon. And together, I think we have. We understand that there have been concerns on the part of the city as to letting the banners go crazy in terms of different participation among different groups. And we think that the decision to highlight the veterans is different from highlighting other groups, and we appreciate that. You guys have been a great partner, and we thank you for that. We've, as Joan mentioned, we have covered the number of folks that want to have banners posted and deployed throughout the city. We couldn't ask for a better partnership than we currently have. We think we've been a good citizen, a good group of citizens down at the Memorial Building. We think that Milzinga has been a great partner, and we think the City of Beacon has been a great partner. And we have no complaints, and we are grateful for what you have done with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to one of the public hearings, does anyone else want to make a public comment other than the two public hearings? This would be the time. Come on up. Tell us who you are and where you live.
Karen Palumbo. I live at 47 Oldcastle Point Road in Wappingers. And the reason I came tonight, I did have a copy of this notice that Ms. Mescal had just read to you. And I just wanted to say that the statement, and I'll repeat it, the last that she had put in her letter, we are working cooperatively with the city officials to raise all the banners so that none will have to be in storage during the next season, and we agree with the city council to cap the program once all banners have already been purchased for the 2021-24 season can be raised next year. I just want to say thank you. Obviously, you know, I've been here more than you'd like me to be here, but making my comments, other people. So apparently somebody was listening to the comments from the local area residents, especially those whose banners did not get raised this past year. It is unfortunate that that did happen, and but it appears as though we did make some headway, and hopefully next year this is not going to be an issue, and that all the banners can go up. So I just want to say the city council members, the mayor, is thank you. And also thank you to Ms. Mescal and Mr. McEnroe. I don't even know who these people are. I met them just now, but I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, before we turn to public hearings, want to make a public comment? Anyone online, Ben, before we turn to public hearings?
No hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. So let's go to the first public hearing. That one is going to be on a local law concerning prohibition of eviction. And I'll open the public hearing. Nick, do you want to provide a quick version of what we're going to be talking about before I open that up?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. So the City of Beacon had previously adopted a good cause eviction local law. Like many throughout the state, it was struck down as found to be preempted and unconstitutional. And then in this past legislative session, the Senate and Assembly passed a bill the governor signed that authorized good cause eviction local law throughout New York State. The state law authorizes local governments outside of New York City to voluntarily participate in the good cause eviction in certain aspects by adopting a local law to provide that it applies in Beacon, but there are two exceptions that are left for the local municipality to decide. And so in your packet is a local law that implements the good cause eviction local law within the City of Beacon and has definitions for those two exemptions. The two local exemptions that you have authority over is what is considered to be a high rent apartment that would be exempt from the good cause eviction local law. The New York State statute said it's any monthly rent that is above 245% of the Dutchess County fair market rent. In your packet is a memo from our office going to that in more detail and also providing what those monthly rents are and what 245% would be. State law says you can have a number lesser or lower than 245%. The other local exemption, if you will.
Higher.
I'm sorry?
Percentage higher
Yes.
than 245%.
Yes, correct. The other exemption is what is considered to be a small landlord. Small landlords are exempt from the good cause eviction local law, and New York State suggests that should be for landlords who own 10 or less units. So if you own 10 or less units, you would be exempt from this law. And then there are some other exemptions in state law that the municipality cannot preempt.
Okay. So let me open the public hearing, and then we'll go down the list of people here. Again, you've got 3 minutes to talk on this. Looks like we have a pretty good list, and so to the extent that, if you're on the list and someone said most of, what you've said, you may want to make it shorter, but that's up to you. So first one is Nick Girton.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Girton. I live in 1172 North Avenue in Ward 1. And I just want to offer my comments strongly in support of the local law prohibiting eviction without good cause. I just want to note that nationally, regionally, locally, we're experiencing a housing crisis that is of generational proportions, and I feel strongly that we need to use all possible tools at our disposal to address that. That includes increasing production of new housing, that includes minimizing barriers to creating new housing, and it also means opting into policy like this, where after the state has cleared the way for cities like Beacon to do more at the local level, like this law, that it should be put on the table and adopted as quickly and as expediently as possible. And I urge consideration and passage of this law as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then Daniel, last name starts with an A, from Poughkeepsie. You tell us your full name, where you live.
My name is Daniel Latona. I live in Poughkeepsie, but I work around the region at For the Many. I applaud the local organizing here in Beacon of Mid-Hudson Valley DSA, Community Voices Heard, and BCAN that led to this public hearing. So for years, the housing movement fought for good cause eviction at the state and local level. I was here in February 2022 to comment for good cause. The city council showed bold leadership and passed it. Now, we didn't know that judges would start striking down local good cause laws citing preemption. When that happened, Housing Justice for All worked even harder to pass it at the state level. Due to lobbying from greedy landlords and developers, good cause was watered down during budget negotiations. As a result, tenants are not good cause eligible if they live in a unit built after 2009, or if it is owner occupied with less than 11 units, rented from a co-op or condo, and a couple other exemptions. But already, additionally, outside New York City, municipalities have to opt in one by one rather than being automatically covered by the law. Nevertheless, for the first time, you have the explicit permission from New York State to pass good cause. They also gave you the power to define a small landlord and set the high rent exemption. So they gave you the ability to opt into a relatively strong good cause law or a weak, ineffective one. This year, good cause passed in the cities of Albany, Ithaca, Kingston, and Poughkeepsie. Newburgh is having a good cause public hearing on August 12th. The City of Albany law applies to landlords who own more than one rental unit and tenants who pay less than 345% of fair market rent. The laws in Ithaca and Poughkeepsie are the same, and Kingston did 1 unit and 300% of fair market rent. The bill that Beacon is considering right now, with a 10-unit threshold and 245% of fair market rent, would be the weakest good cause law in the state by far. Good cause was already watered down in state budget negotiations. Please do not water it down even more. If you define a small landlord as those who own more than 10 units, that creates an LLC loophole where landlords will create multiple LLCs in order to disguise how many units they own and avoid enforcement of the law. New York does not have a publicly available LLC database. Tenants would have no way of knowing if their unit was covered by good cause. Please follow the lead of the other cities and define a small landlord as someone who owns more than 1 unit. We're also asking you to set the fair market rent exemption at 345% to cover as many tenants as possible, other than tenants in the high-rent luxury apartments who are left out of the state law. Now, good cause is not rent control or a ban on evictions. It's a defense that tenants can use in court to fight arbitrary evictions and rent increases more than 10% or CPI plus 5%, whichever is lower. It will not fix everything, but that is not an excuse to do nothing. You, the council, have the opportunity to pass a strong good cause law and protect the maximum number of tenants. Beacon tenants, if good cause passes, you will be safer in your homes. That will be your opportunity to come together and organize tenants' unions to defend your rights. Landlords have the money, but you, the tenants, have the power. Thank you.
Thank you. Clark Gebman.
Clark Ebden, 2 Wilson Street. The discussion on LLCs was a pretty sophisticated discussion, but it's kind of like just the icing on the cake, and there's nothing in between underneath it, because fractional ownership by small stockholding corporations, any number of vehicles can be used for a small landlord's qualification that you would never detect even in a court of law. So one would ask, well, what is the reason really for this? And to me, it's just show, smoke and mirrors. The first thing that's done is the most livable, the most voluminous, and the most desirable, which is redundant, are the buildings that have been built in Beacon since 2009. So right up the top, I don't know what we've gone from. We've gone from maybe 4,500 lots, maybe 5,000, 6,000 housing units. And now we've added, and since 2009, maybe we've added 1,500 housing units, and maybe we're on the verge of adding another 1,500, I don't know. But the preponderance of living units aren't covered by this. So it's a good feeling, oh, we're doing something statement. You would be far more productive if you gave 1 and 2 family owners the right to build 3 and 4 family houses and let them benefit from the generational wealth and support retirements for long-standing residents than putting up planning obstacles that require tens of thousands of dollars of investment in a crapshoot to go before the planning board. You're doing exactly the opposite of what is needed to both empower property owners to build generational wealth and meet demands for this increasingly dense demand that is appropriate for a town that has an MTA station. I grew up in upstate. I know upstate like the back of my hand. If you want grass and you want lakes and you want fresh air, the state is full of places to go. But this is an urban cluster, and it's important for the United States as well as the state, as well as this county, to maximize its property to allow for people to live. And the more property you have for rent, the lower the rents will come.
Thank you very much. Julie Winterbottom?
Good evening. My name is Julie Winterbottom. I live at 80 Duchess Terrace in Ward 1, and I'm a member of Beacon Climate Action Now. I commented a few weeks ago in favor of Beacon opting into the most robust good cause eviction law possible, which means defining small landlord as owning 1 rental unit but not more than 1. We need this definition to protect a meaningful number of tenants and to address the nature of the housing stock in Beacon. I've heard some council members say they would like more statistics on rentals in Beacon before they commit to the 1 rental unit definition of small landlord. While I am not against statistics, I think in this instance they are irrelevant. Either you want to protect tenants from unfair evictions or you don't. And if you do, you should protect as many as possible. The idea that landlords who own just a handful of rental units might be mom and pop landlords, which I assume means financially strapped, is also irrelevant. For one thing, it's pure speculation. All kinds of people own just a few rental units. And even if the notion were demonstrably true, there's no reason why a non-wealthy landlord should be exempted from this law. No landlord, whatever their economic status, should be allowed to unfairly evict a tenant or retaliate against a tenant who asks for repairs. We don't make our building codes apply only to large property owners because maybe smaller owners can't afford to comply. The point is to protect people from injuries. The same goes for good cause eviction. In this case, we want to protect people from being unfairly pushed out of their home. A decent landlord will not have to spend a penny on this law, and all landlords are allowed very generous, I would say overly generous, rent hikes. Please give the tenants in our community a small amount of protection by passing the strongest version of the law, and then please turn your energy to addressing the dire need for truly affordable housing in Beacon. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Mandel.
Good evening. My name is Brian Mandel. I am a resident of Wilk Street in Ward 3, and I'm a member of Beacon Climate Action Now. First, I'd just like to thank all of you for very thoughtfully and proactively taking on the issue of affordable housing in Beacon. Ever since I've lived here and talked with other folks who have lived here, this has been by far the most pressing issue people have talked about, and what they like least about living here is our housing crisis and increased housing costs. 2 years ago, many of you and the former council took the brave and righteous step and passed a good cause eviction law. And tonight I'm asking you to honor the commitment that you and your former colleagues made and pass a new version of that law. While this version of the law has flaws that some of the other speakers have mentioned that are mandated by the state, it will still be a vital protection for many of Beacon's citizens. And specifically, I'm asking you to pass the most protective and comprehensive version of this law, in particular when you were talking about how many tenants it protects and the question of what is a small landlord. This law is meant to be a protection for tenants, and when you're talking about these issues, I hope that you are looking at it from the perspective of those tenants. What protections and rights that you receive should not be incumbent on how many buildings your landlord owns. I've never met a person who takes that into consideration when they're renting an apartment or even looks into how many buildings their landlord might own. And the idea that your neighbor down the street might have a more robust protection of the law because of a decision your landlord makes doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And lastly, I hope that this is also the first of many steps that you all take to address the issue of housing affordability in this community. While this will be a vital protection for people who currently live here, it doesn't do anything to address the underlying issues that have caused the housing crisis that we now face. And I look forward to hearing you all discuss this in the future. Thanks. Have a good evening.
Thanks very much. Larry Reeder.
Hello, I'm Larry Reeder, Ward 4 resident and a member of Beacon Climate Action Now. I've been a renter and a landlord, so I see both sides of this issue. We moved to Beacon in large part for the vibrant community here, a community with a history of relationships, a place where artists, trade people, teachers, and service workers can afford to live, a place where people who work here care about Beacon as a home. This helps make Beacon special, and it attracts real estate investors. As return on investment runs over renter protections, I see people forced out and the fabric of the community torn. I ask this council to pass a strong good cause eviction policy for tenant protections to favor Beacon residents over investor speculation. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Is it Jesse Regan? Or Reagan?
Hi, I'm Jesse Reagan. I live in Ward 2, and I'm a member of Beacon Climate Action Now, and I volunteer with Fairground here in Beacon. My partner and I have been renting for 4 years here, and we've been looking to break out of the self-perpetuating cycle of renting and buy a home here. We love this city for its diversity and socially conscious community. It's the place that we want to be. I want to thank the mayor and the city council for having thoughtful discussions about housing policy. This is a key moment for Beacon to provide strong protections for renters, rather than having the weakest protection in the state, as some people have pointed out. I hope that the city government will show the strength to demonstrated in 2022 by enacting the strongest good cause eviction policy possible. And I hope that we can continue to look critically at how we as a city can prioritize housing justice for the benefit of all of our community. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Sherry Griffin?
Good evening, City Council. My name is Sherry Griffin. I'm a lifetime resident of Beacon. I was born and raised here and would like to continue to stay here. As far as the good cause eviction, I would hope that the City Council would adapt the strongest possible protection. As far as what a small landlord is, it should be someone who owns just one unit. Tenants shouldn't feel intimidated about asking for repairs in fear of getting an outrageous or astronomical rent increase or fear of being evicted. And everyone deserves housing. I wish I could show you the pictures I have on my phone, seeing people's items put out on the street because they were evicted due to landlords that are, I don't want to say it in a bad way, but greedy for whatever reason. Seeing children's beds, toys, clothes out on the street due to an astronomical increase in their rent. No one should ever have to go through that. No one should ever have to see anything like that, which is why I hope that the City Council will adopt the strongest good cause eviction legislation, which is not what the current language is. That's not the strongest, that's the weakest. For me, luckily, I have a good landlord. I'm one of the few that has a good landlord. But having somewhere to live shouldn't be about luck, because eventually what happens, your luck runs out. So with that, I'm just asking that the City Council adapts the strongest good cause eviction that will help a wide range of people. And let's not make, Beacon is known for a lot of things, but the one thing we wouldn't want to be known for is pushing a certain economic demographic population out of our town. I go to bed every night. I have PTSD, wondering, is my luck gonna run out? That's not a good
15
feeling.
seconds.
That's, people go to sleep every night wondering, is that their last night living in their apartment, whatever it is that they're renting? That's not a good feeling. And that'll be it. And I thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much. Nicholas Moran?
Good evening, Nicholas Moran. I live on South Street. I'm a tenant in Beacon and also a member of the Mid-Hudson Valley Democratic Socialists of America. And I urge the City Council to pass the strongest tenant protections, following the cities of Kingston, Poughkeepsie, Ithaca, and Albany, and making sure that a small landlord exemption is 1 unit. This law is really like 10 years too late, if not 20. And this requires tenants to have the knowledge and ability to actually be willing to go to court, and having the court being the last defense against a bad landlord. And I've seen way too many of my friends and coworkers struggling to find reasonable rents in Hudson Valley, and story after story, large complexes, small complexes being purchased by out-of-state landlords and jacking up the rents with no improvements and no recourse for tenants and people moving out of the Hudson Valley because they just can't find a place to live. And evictions are violent. Evictions have devastating effects on families in our community. Kids have to deal with that when families get evicted. It takes a while for people to build back their lives again after eviction. And with our court systems and no ability to get legal counsel, there's no right to counsel in the Hudson Valley, it's really scary to go and be in that process. So we should do everything we can in the city of Beacon to keep people in their homes and make sure that we set the rent exemption really high so it applies to the most tenants. Because every renter, no matter where they live and who they rent for, deserves to have some stability and have protections from greedy landlords. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Danny Noak?
Hi, my name is Danny. I live here in Beacon at 50 Falconer Street. I'm a member of DSA. My wife and I own our home, but we fully support the strongest possible version of good cause eviction. This is a beautiful city, but it's getting more and more expensive to live in, and I would like to see my neighbors and their families who rent not get priced out of their homes and be able to continue being a part of this community with all of us. So please adopt good cause eviction for our city with a small landlord definition of 1 unit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Vikas Ashoka?
Hello, Mayor, Council, and the public. I'm Vikas Ashoka, Ward 1, member of Beacon Climate Action Now. Good cause eviction, we've talked about the details of it, so I'll focus on the kind of context in which we're approaching this. First of all, this is not some activist housing justice panacea of a law. As one housing advocate statewide called it after it was passed, it's the weakest good cause eviction legislation in the country. And the current draft that you all are looking at is the weakest version that has been considered amongst upstate towns since then. So please consider making it stronger. It's also not even as protective against rent increases as the version of good cause eviction that the previous council passed. And so, even by Beacon City Council's current or existing stances and precedents, we can be better than this. Our community has been suffering for too long, and the housing crisis, specifically in Beacon, has been too acute to skip or water down this law beyond the strongest version possible that we should have. Our neighbors who are evicted through no cause of their own, when that happens nowadays, it's effectively a banishment from our community. What the previous speaker said about eviction being violence, that is what it is in the context of Beacon today, especially. I was looking at apartments on a big rental aggregator a few weeks ago, and the cheapest one-bedroom apartment, granted that allowed pets, was $2,600 per month. So without going through all the math, if you look at the most recent data of the median household income in Beacon, and you think about the conventional wisdom that no one should pay more than 30% of their income on housing plus renter's insurance plus utilities, the cheapest one bedroom in Beacon is unaffordable to the average household in Beacon. And so a family down the street, you all know a lot of renters, you all talk to constituents who are renters. If any of them gets evicted through no cause of their own, that's a death sentence to their community ties. Their kids won't be able to be here in their community. They won't be able to be part of the local community. And so we need to protect them. It won't solve all of our problems. It's triage. Let's try to stop the bleeding in as many ways as we can while we work on the longer term solutions, which
seconds.
is not enough housing supply, and the current market being subject to the whims of investors who prioritize profit over a healthy community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That's everyone on the list. If there's someone in the physical audience here who wasn't on the list that would like to speak, this would be your time. Come on up, tell us your name and where you live.
Hi, my name is Tony Meck. I live in Glenham now, but I want to share my experience renting in Beacon for 7 years. I moved to Beacon in 2014 to live with my partner who was already living here, and I was very excited to find a community in such a beautiful and vibrant place. We looked at many units around Beacon, which were wildly expensive even in 2014. We finally found a sweet second-story apartment owned by a man who lived part-time on the first floor. Our new landlord was kind and offered us rent for lower than any other unit that we were seeing. And even when he raised the rent after 4 or so years of us being in that apartment, it was after a discussion of our budget, and it was still far under the going rates at the time. Our landlord viewed my spouse and I as human and worthy of a home in Beacon. And this is what enabled us to stay here until we were able to afford a home of our own in Glenham. This is a very happy story, and it is a wildly uncommon one. My story was enabled by 2 things: the kindness of a single unit landlord and an array of my own economic and social privileges. Most people I know, whom I met when I moved here in 2014, do not have such a happy story. Every year, I've said goodbye to friends and fellow organizers who cannot afford Beacon anymore. My experience is that those who leave Beacon do not come back. One rent raised too far, one lost job, or just one that didn't keep up with inflation, and they are forced to leave our city. My friends have been pushed out by rapidly rising rents and a lack of protections for renters. Some of Beacon's brightest stars, our most skilled community organizers, are just not here anymore. They are off enriching other communities, and Beacon is now left with only those who can afford it. We cannot rely on kind people like my former landlord to create a strong community. It takes strong policy to ensure that Beacon is a place in which people of all backgrounds can thrive. Kindness and luck are hard to come by in 2024, and they often primarily benefit those already with privilege, whereas policy can create strong protections for all people. This law is both an economic proposition and an expression of your values. It's an articulation of who you as council members believe Beacon is for. Is it only for those who can afford ever-increasing rent? Or is it those who have poured their life into this city and deserve a home in return?
Your time has elapsed.
I just want to say you have the opportunity to be the landlord, the kind landlord in this story, and to open up your home to all those who are already here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else before we go online? Okay, Ben.
If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment tonight, please use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. If you're dialing in by phone, you will need to press *9. I will call on people in the order that I see them. First, we have Arthur Kamens. Arthur, you now have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry I can't be here tonight in person. I want you to keep in the front of your mind the image that Cherie gave you of evicted families on the street as you consider this. You're being asked to approve legal available protections.
I'm sorry, I can't hear Arthur.
Excuse me?
Can you speak up?
I'm gonna see if Pete can you hear me?
Yes, but do try to speak up.
Okay. Okay. I want you to keep in the front of your mind the image that Cherie gave you of evicted families on the street. You are being asked to approve available legal protections for a moral right that I think you will Everyone deserves a decent place to live. That moral right must not be made conditional on the number of units a landlord owns. Of course, tenants and landlords have mutual responsibilities to one another. Tenants must pay the rent and not violate lease terms. Good cause eviction doesn't change that, nor does it change the law that already requires landlords to go to court to evict a tenant. It does require them to provide a reason for eviction. Current practice all too often allows landlords to ignore the law or evict or not renew leases arbitrarily. I hope you can all agree that is patently unfair and a violation of the moral principle. As you all surely know, there's a housing crisis in Beacon. As a number of speakers have said, this law doesn't fully address that, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. We have the ability to offer some measure of protection for people. Beacon can provide a measure of protection from unjust eviction, lease non-renewal, and unjustified exorbitant rent increases. That means extending the protection to as many people as possible, which, as a number of people said, means one or more rental units. I want to be clear, the moral principle should not be dependent on whether the landlord owns 1, 10, or 100 units. There should never be a presumed right to make a living off rentals when it violates another's ability to have a roof over their head. I wish we had more data, but passing this law should not be dependent on it because the need is clear. So I'm asking you to do the right moral thing, define a small
15 seconds.
landlord as owning 1 or more units. Show Beacon tenants you prioritize their needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next speaker on Zoom is Sergey. Sergey, you have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Sergey Krasikov, Ward 3. I want to express my support for adopting this law and giving protection to the renters. At the same time, I do ask you to consider changing it to be the strongest possible within the state law boundaries and expand the definition to include 1 or more units. As our speakers have said, as a tenant who's getting evicted,
Hey, Sergey, can you try to speak up?
Sergey, we can't hear you. We're trying to fix the audio.
Okay, I'll try to speak louder. I wanted to express my support for the...
Hold on, Sergey, we can't hear you.
So just wait a second. Don't worry. Thanks, Pete.
Is it better now?
Just wait 1 second.
Okay.
Try now, Sergey.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. Okay.
All right. All right. Good evening, City Council and Mr. Mayor. My name is Sergey Krasikov, Ward 3. I wanted to express my support for good cause eviction law. I think Beacon did the right thing when it adopted before, even if courts found it unconstitutional. I think this is what helped to push the governor and our state representatives to pass this as a state law. I think we did play a big role in that. But right now, I think we do need to pass it. But we should make it as strong as possible within the state law boundaries and following suit of Kingston and other towns and extend the definition to include 1 or more units. As a tenant, I've been a renter for over 20 years and, likely have never been evicted, but, it wouldn't have mattered to me whether the landlord owns 10 apartments or 1. I want protections and people who work for protections. And as also has been stated, the landlords are protected by state law and tenants must comply with their lease agreements, and if they do violate it, landlords do have a way to recoup their properties and continue renting to other tenants in case of violations. There is a way for that. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Thank you, and I think this is an important step for Beacon.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next Zoom speaker is Esther. Esther, you have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ben. My name is Esther Jackson. I am a current resident of the village of Fishkill. I lived in the city of Beacon for several years, and I'm ready to express my support of good cause, the city passing good cause eviction under the strongest possible terms, including a definition of a small landlord as only including one rental unit. The commenter that said that we really have to work to build community definitely, resonated with me. I'm, working to build community in my new municipality. I'm stepping back from a lot of projects in Beacon, and, I'm very happy to be doing the work that I'm doing, but I miss Beacon, and I'm sad that, I'm kind of stepping away from it, and I'm just one data point, but I know that there are others like me as well. So thank you for considering this, and thank you for listening to my comments.
Thank you.
The next hand raised on Zoom is John. John, you have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is John Gang. I'm a resident of Beacon. I live in Ward 1 at the corner of Willow and Main Street. I'm also just wanted to comment and voice my support for the good cause eviction legislation and to use the strongest possible definition of small landlord as only owning one rental unit. I don't have too much to say other than what's already been said, that I really do feel that putting at least these basic protections in place is critical to protecting the fabric of our community, to protecting renters who are already subject to rapidly increasing rental prices. And as a renter in Beacon, who I consider myself fortunate to have a pretty good job, I'm shocked at how financially strenuous it already is, and I just can't imagine what it's like for residents who are anywhere close to the New York State average of $40,000 a year for income, trying to make it work in the city. And I would just strongly encourage the city council to go with the voice of the many people who spoke up in favor of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are no further hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. Council, you want to close the public hearing?
Nick, I have a clarifying question. If we, as a council, decided we did want to change the number of units, is that substantial enough that if we hadn't reopened the meeting, so we could close
Correct,
it and
yes.
still make that change
You
and
can,
vote
yes.
on it without having to
Correct.
renotice it?
Yep, and that's arising out of comments from the public and also just the nature of the law. So yes, that would not require continuing a public hearing or renotice.
All right. So having said that, let me suggest we close the public hearing. Can I get a motion to do that?
Motion?
Second. Okay. Any further discussion on that? All right. All in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed? Okay. That's the one. There's a second public hearing, which was a continuation of a prior one, where there was a request to keep the parking minimum open. So let's open the public hearing, and if there are any further comments on it, Nick, do you want to give us the, 30-second summary?
Yes.
1-minute summary?
Yes, so this proposed local law will amend the Beacon zoning code concerning parking requirements. It's being referred to the City and County Planning Board. We've received 2 comment letters from the County Planning Board. All those comments have been incorporated. We've received comments from the City Planning Board. Those comments have been incorporated. The City Planner, Natalie, is also on the line tonight to answer any questions. In a nutshell, the law grants the Planning Board with discretion to establish site-specific off-street parking standards during the application review process based upon the context of the property, the proposed use, and the zoning district. The law also simplifies and condenses the city's parking standards into a table as opposed to a text version. Within the CMS, L, and WD zoning districts, there's a maximum allowable number of off-street parking, and then within the other zoning districts, the R1, the RD, et cetera, there's a range of minimum and maximum allowable off-street parking requirements. The planning board's site-specific standards considerations include, but are not limited to, parking studies, parcel size, proposed use, availability of nearby public and street parking, public transit access, shared parking arrangements, land banking if permitted, and public input during the public hearing. So the planning board is reviewing parking standards with that criteria in mind. I think that's an overview of the law, Mayor.
Okay. So let me open the public hearing. Of those who have signed up, Nick Girton.
Hello again, Nick Girton, 1172 North Avenue in Ward 1. I just want to offer a comment on parking minimums as they specifically apply to residential development and housing production in the city. I mentioned in my last set of comments there's a need to consider any and all tools that lower barriers or remove barriers to housing production as a way to help drive housing affordability. And I feel strongly that attaching minimums to new housing production creates a number of negative externalities, one of them being the production and cost associated with housing for developers and for other entities that are trying to provide more housing options and affordability in the city. I'll also say that requiring parking minimums drives environmental externalities in that it creates an incentivized demand for people using cars. I'll speak as a resident who currently lives in the city without a car, uses a bicycle, walks, and takes available public transit. It is something that I have the privilege and ability to do, and I would hope that as we consider more housing development and production in the city, that developers are able to, where possible, not be required to provide housing for those who may not need to be utilizing mandated parking for a lifestyle that doesn't suit their needs or wants. Thank you.
Thank you. Clark Keppen.
The prior comment was another intelligent presentation. When anyone starts talking about externalities, my ears perk up because I know I'm listening to someone who knows something about economics and finance. Otherwise, they're not likely to use the word. And I'd like to drill down a little bit on what he said. So he said things that discourage property owners in the city from increasing the unit count would be things like requiring a 5% slope, as this law requires, not greater, even though the handicap slope is 12%. That if you have more than 2 units in a house, you need a 24-foot wide driveway. This is insanity. If you talk about housing in Beacon, and we're talking about the impact of parking on making housing here, just to be clear. When we talk about increasing housing, well, let's see now. We know what's going on with the big buildings, the big lots that get big units and lots of capital investment. What's left? 320 acres in New York City want to move to Beacon of 5 acres. So that's all of a sudden, or excuse me, 5 square miles, 320 square miles of New York City and 5 square miles of Beacon with a train station. And forget about one day, maybe you'll get quicker, the trains. So this is going to be a problem for a long time to come. And I dare predict in the next 10 years, 50% of the wood frame residences in Beacon will be literally torn down or rebuilt for somebody of means to afford it. And so what we're really talking about is the slice of Beacon that can enhance the number of units and you have no accommodation for 3 or 4 family houses, for promotion of generational wealth transfer among parents that are retiring to use the money for their estate. So the long and short of it is wrong. And now we have the prison ground. And we have within our power to speak up about what should happen and what kind of schools and roads should be built as a result of a
15
massive
seconds.
project. Not just a small little edge of a project they call for some developer that's very familiar with doing these things, you know. But you have this massive amount, and all the housing advocates, they act like
Your
it
time
isn't
is elapsed.
available to protest the city of Beacon to take a claim to that prison ground.
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the public arena want to make a comment that you haven't done before on parking? Okay. Ben, anyone online?
There's one hand raised on Zoom, and that is for the phone number. Oh, excuse me. There's one hand raised on Zoom, and that is for Sergey. Sergey, you have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Good evening again, Sergey Krasikov, Ward 3 in Beacon, obviously, New York. In general, I support eliminating parking minimums and making our city more less dependent on cars. However, in most places where that was done successfully, it was paired with public transportation development and with wide adoption of biking and pedestrian infrastructure, like protected lanes, sidewalks everywhere, lighting, safe crossings. And public transportation, Beacon doesn't have, much sway over. We can obviously work with county, but for bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, this is something is with our purview. And I think we need a citywide stakeholder engagement to understand community needs and reservations. I've been talking to a lot of bikers, a lot of parents with kids, and I hear a lot of frustration about how certain areas are not safe or certain navigational routes are very hard to go through. I live near the end of Liberty Street. Lack of sidewalks and safe bike routes make no-car transportation for my family, especially when I'm with kids, more dangerous and sometimes dangerous beyond what I feel comfortable with, especially during rush hours and after sunsets, which often leads me to opting out for a car instead of biking. So as you're getting ready to waive parking requirements and arguably make a step towards more future of urban planning and design, I also ask the council to seriously consider another important step towards the future, a meaningful bike pedestrian master plan that's designed professionally with community input and then adopted into our next comprehensive plan update in 2027. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else? I just will note that some of our speakers are off topic on minimum parking. Ben, are we done online?
No more hands online.
Okay, then that's fine. I'll take a motion to close the public hearing on
Motion to
minimum
close
parking.
the public hearing?
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you very much. Okay. Paloma, okay on closing public hearing?
Yes, I'm fine closing the public hearing on parking requirements.
Thank you. Yep, and I'll make a point of trying to ask you on each of the votes. Thank you. Okay. We have a number of resolutions, so I would just suggest that the reports from council, mayor, and administrator be kept to a minimum, if you can. And let's start with Dan. You've been away, so that's an encouragement to stay short.
All right. Well, I have my longest report in a while. No, just kidding. I just want to give everybody the heads up for those of you who have considered a life in public service and specifically in law enforcement, that on September 28th there will be an exam for deputy sheriffs and police officers, and the application deadline for that civil service exam is August 9th, so it's coming up in a few days. You can go to dutchessny.gov/jobs to apply for the civil service exam. Dutchess County is also offering test prep. All of this information is on the Beacon website down at the bulletins, so you can see it all there, or if you have other questions, you can email me or any city council member. I was away for most of the month of July on vacation with my family, and I regret that I was not able to join in the festivities for the Beacon Elks. So I just wanted to make a point of congratulating Lodge 1493 for their 100 years of service to the city of Beacon. We've all benefited for decades from their generosity and sense of community. And then lastly, I have office hours always on the third Sunday of every month. So this month, that's the 18th. So if you have any questions or want to talk to me in a private setting, I'll be on August 18th. I will be at Trax Coffee House from 10 a.m. to noon. Thanks.
Okay. I'll be very brief. Just wanted to thank the Banner Committee for meeting with Dan, Pam, and I, and also for John and Joan for coming tonight and sharing the decision that the council made over a month ago in July, but I'm glad that that's recognized, and I appreciate their support. I have a couple of follow-ups from that meeting just to check on a few things, so I'll shoot you a quick note, Chris. But again, just thank them for their volunteerism. They've done a lot of work in getting the Banner program up and running. They maintain it as a small committee, and I found the discussion very positive, and I thank them for coming here tonight and expressing the partnership that the city has had and the nice working relationship. So that's all.
Thanks. Sir?
I'll just keep it very brief. In terms of public service, too, I want to thank everyone. When I turn off my microphone, I want to thank everyone for who volunteers at the election sites for elections. It's something that I've enjoyed doing in the past, and there are dedicated people who give long hours to that. There's a phone number I'll give. Please consider doing this, because there's a lot of folks who spend very long days and could use the additional help. So for Dutchess County elections, it's 845-486-2473. The email is duchesselections@dutchessny.gov. So please do consider volunteering to help out on Election Day.
I'll just say I have office hours coming up on Friday, August 16th at 4 to 6 p.m. at Pole Hill Park, and if for some reason the weather does not cooperate, it will be at Bank Square Coffee House. That's 4 to 6 on Friday, the 16th. Happy to talk about anything, including any housing issues, either immediately with this law or other issues that people might have on their mind. And Paloma, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Molly. I will also be brief. I will not be holding office hours in the month of August, but I welcome anyone to reach out to me and schedule a time to speak on any issue concerning the city. My email address is pwake@beaconny.gov.
Okay, I get to go last, which means all the other comments I can just say thank you for. And I can also just add, for all the people who came and spoke in the public, we really do appreciate the input, and we're always listening. That's all I got. City Administrator, anything?
I'm good this week.
All right. City Attorney, we're good? All right. So let's start up on our local laws. I just remind council that we also have an executive session following this. So let's start up. The first one is a resolution appointing Coleman Lawrence to the position of heavy motor equipment operator. Can I get a motion and a second?
Second.
So that was Amber and
Molly.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, we just discussed this at workshop earlier this evening. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Paloma?
Aye.
Very good, thank you. The second one is appointing Isabella Nocerino to the position of police officer. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
So that was Amber and Dan.
Buzzers.
Any comments? Again, you had an introduction by the chief, and Isabella was here because she's on duty tonight. Any other discussion?
Just because that happened while I couldn't hear anything, if someone could please verbally summarize what Isabella spoke to. I, of course, read Chief Figlio's memo.
Yeah, hey, oh, sorry, do you want to take it?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, Paloma, she just briefly kind of reiterated how much she's enjoyed working for the city in her time as she's been a dispatcher, that she had finished up her schooling and learned a lot in that and was looking forward to, taking that further in her career with the city. So she didn't speak for very long, but that was kind of the gist. Anything I missed?
Yeah, I would just add that she came up through the cadet program. The chief said she was the cadet chief when the chief was merely a lieutenant, and he has been a dispatch person, so it's one of those people who's come through the ranks, and we're really pleased to get, because I think it's the only person we could get off the list who could meet all the requirements.
Yeah, we had two others that we are not going to move forward with.
Okay.
So they did not pass the rigorous background checks.
All right. Everyone okay? All in favor of appointing Isabella Nocerina to police officer, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Paloma?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Anyone opposed? Hearing none. The next one is a resolution authorizing the city administrator. This is to execute the agreement with Sunup Construction on the accessible curb ramps project. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
That's Dan.
Second.
And Molly. And again, we discussed this earlier this evening at workshop. Any further discussion? And so this would be authorizing the city administrator to execute with Sunup, who is the lowest responsible bidder.
Yes.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. Paloma?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. The next one is the other one we discussed at workshop. So this is authorizing the city administrator to execute an agreement with MCT, and that is for the stair replacement project adjacent to City Hall. Can I get a motion and second?
Motion.
Second.
So that's Molly and Dan. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of that authorization of the city administrator, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Paloma?
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. The next one is authorizing the city administrator to submit an application, and this is for a Climate Smart Communities grant. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
So that was Jeff and Amber. And again, I will remind everyone, this is for the grant for the Melzinga Dam project that came along at the last minute. And again, in order to meet that deadline, we need to do an authorization this evening. I think it's a great opportunity. Any other comments on this one? Okay. All those in favor of authorizing the city administrator to submit an application for this Climate Smart Communities grant for the Melzinga Dam, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Paloma?
Aye.
Excellent. That's a unanimous vote. We don't need that roll call, right?
Correct.
All right, great.
Are the bonds going to be roll call?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So now the next four are all bonds, and we'll do them one at a time because we need a roll call. So the first one is authorizing the issuance of bonds for the Fishkill Avenue water main replacement.
Motion.
That's
Second.
Amber and Dan. Any further discussion? And then we'll do a roll call vote. I will begin. I will vote yes. Amber?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And Paloma?
Yes.
Okay, one down. The second one, I'm looking for a motion and a second on authorizing the issuance of bonds for the Highway Department equipment.
Motion.
Second.
So that was Amber and Dan, and this is for a list of heavy equipment that we went through in our capital plan. Again, I need a roll call vote. I will start with a yes, and I'll go the other direction. Jeff?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Amber?
Yes.
And Paloma?
Yes.
Okay, two down. Thank you. So the third one, and I know this sounds repetitive, but we need to do each one, is for the bonds for the wastewater treatment plant upgrades. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion.
Second.
So that's Dan and Amber. And Nick, would you remind us the dollar amounts for these?
Certainly. For this one, the wastewater treatment, it's $1,304,000. For the prior one of the highway equipment, it's $700,000. For the water main replacement, which was the first one, it's $1 million. And then for the last one, for the fire truck, it's $1,741,450.
Okay, so on the wastewater bonds, any discussion on that? Okay, so let's do a roll call vote. Again, I'll start. Lee votes yes, and then Amber?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
And Paloma?
Yes.
Thank you so much. And the last one is also for bonds, but as Nick said, this is for the ladder firefighting vehicle. And again, a motion and a second.
Motion.
Second.
Amber and Molly. And again, this is about $1.7 million.
Correct.
And so let's do the roll call vote. Again, I'll start. Lee votes yes. Jeff?
Yes.
Molly?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Amber?
Yes.
And Paloma?
Yes.
Thank you all. So that takes care of those. We good?
Yes.
All right. So the next one is I'm looking for a motion and a second on adopting the local law concerning minimum parking requirements.
Motion.
Second.
So that was Amber and Molly. Any discussion?
I would just say that I was still looking for metrics, that there would be an evaluation of the effectiveness of this law in time, so I'm opposed to voting in favor of it at this time, just because we did not include those kind of evaluations, other than it'll be nice to look at it at some point in time. To me, that's not sufficient.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that we were ready to vote on this law. I thought there was still a lot of work to go. I thought we were actually in the middle of some discussion, and when I watched the meeting in July that I missed, it wasn't on the agenda, so I was surprised to see it coming up for a vote tonight. I intend to vote no on this law.
So I think we've had extensive discussion. By the way, is Natalie on?
I am.
Okay.
I'm here.
In case there are any questions. But I thought we went through this. If I recall, the first thing we did was we actually have a minimum parking requirement for R1, R2, but not RD, right? So we did one for R1 and R2. And then for the other districts, we've created some standards and some criteria, but we don't have minimum parking requirements, if I've got that right. So I think we addressed the big piece, which was what do we do in our single-family zones? We took care of that by having a minimum and a maximum, which is lower than the 1960s version. And then what we did in the other areas is we asked for standards, which we provided. We actually then solicited input from the planning board as to whether those standards were sufficient for them, and I think we got a response that said that would work correctly. Right? So I'm prepared to vote yes on this. Other comments?
My continued concern is balancing, as some of the commenters have stated both tonight and before, the taking out these minimums alongside investments into alternative forms of transportation or other, sorry, I'm blanking on the term for it right now, but measures that support alternative forms of transportation, whether that's biking or public transportation or walking. I know that the conversation sort of dead-ended in terms of the fund that we were to potentially create for parking in lieu, since we took the minimums out completely of CMS, L, and WD. I would be interested, if there's anyone else interested on council, in trying to retool the law so that we had a few more minimums so that we could get a fund started. But if that's not the best way to start investing, I'm open to other ideas.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Paloma. I would say I am interested in that and in, the idea of, I know I talk a bit about the comprehensive plan, but about what other work we want to do around parking minimums, or parking things related to this law. I will say that I am fine to vote and will vote yes if we bring it to a vote today for this law as it is now, because I believe in our ability to do that work in addition or adjacent to it after the fact. So I feel like there's real benefit to passing this law now, real things that can be done immediately with future developments coming down the pike in the city that are how we want the city to be in the future. And I think that starts with this vote now, knowing that there are also other changes we want to make down the line. So that's why I think this law is a step in the right direction, also knowing that there's a lot more work that we have to do and future iterations of the city council have to do as well.
Yeah, Molly, my line of thinking is in line with yours. I think we've been discussing this quite a bit. I, very early said that part of what we need to do as a fast follower is think about ways that we encourage people to bike or walk or whatever it is that's not driving a car to the spot directly in front of the store they'd like to go to. But I don't think that that's contingent on the law. I think that's part of what we need to do in terms of our strategic planning as a council. I do also theoretically understand that without a minimum, we cannot charge a pilot in lieu of, and so I wouldn't hold the law up for that. Although, again, in line with what Molly is saying, I think that's a discussion that we need to have as a council, and we need to have that very soon. But I am also fine with voting tonight, and I would vote yes.
So I have a question for Jeff. I thought we were going to ask the planning board to kind of review and provide us input. Would there be a way that would work with what you're thinking?
If we formalized it in the law and said that that's a requirement at a certain date, I don't like leaving it open-ended as something nice to do at some point in time. I think we need more metrics. I think we need more evaluation associated with this law.
So can I make a motion to amend the law to include a clause that states the planning board will provide a summary of their findings after the first application goes through without parking minimums? Does that suffice, Jeff?
Just the first.
Fine, the first 5. I don't know, what do you want?
I think I'd stretch it out. I'd like to see, periodic evaluations of this thing.
Well, why don't we then suggest that in the first year, and then the second, and a recommendation if it's required, if it would make sense thereafter?
If we're codifying it, that's better.
That's fine, yeah. I just think we have to, express what it is that you want to see so that we can amend the motion.
Yeah. Right. Would that work?
That would work.
Nick, is that language we can insert logically?
We can. This isn't right. We can add a section in the local law that requires a planning board to provide a report with respect to evaluating the law and providing metrics. I mean, we have to come up with a language now within 1 year of the implementation of a local law.
Yeah, I would be careful on being too specific. I think
Right.
the worry that we have is it's an intangible, right? In terms of understanding, because the ideal would be, drop price of building a new house by $10,000, right? And I think that's going to be too specific. So I think we have to ask them metrics, if available, something like that would give them a little bit of room, right?
How about that they require the following, including but not limited to, the number of applications in each district, the required parking, whatever information.
Maybe a comparison to the old standard?
Comparison to the old standard.
And whether it had a significant effect on the cost of construction?
I don't know if the planning board would be able to
Yeah.
provide that. Yeah. And other information they deem relevant, or that the city council may request.
Jeff, what metrics are you looking for?
I'm not prepared. I mean, this is something that we should have been discussing, I think, at a further length. And I feel like this should be evaluated in a discussion with the planning board, not something that we have to put together at this moment.
So why don't we include language that says, as the planning board may, offer or suggest as relevant? Right, because I do think they are the experts. And I hear what you're asking, Jeff, and I'm trying to find language that works. Well, you kind of have to leave some of it to them, right? So I think there's a little bit of kind of up to them to offer up, knowing we're looking for information regarding impact, right? So can you make Nick, do you have a version of that we can kind of hear?
I can, so assuming the support is there, it would be a motion to amend the local law to add a new section 14 and renumber the subsequent sections. And the new section 14 to read, the planning board is required to provide a summary of the effects of implementation of this law to the city council within 1 year, 2 and 3 years of the adoption, to provide information including but not limited to the number of applications in each district, the required number of spaces provided for that application, what that application would have been required to provide under the prior zoning, and other information that the planning board deems relevant or that the city council may subsequently request.
That work?
That last part in particular, I think is good.
Yeah.
This isn't a substantive change, I assume?
No, because we've had those discussions and it's not, it's just procedural in nature.
And as I made the motion, I agree with the way that you've stated it. I don't know if there was a second on it.
I agree with the seconder.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. All right, so I appreciate you putting that forward. That sounds something that we can all understand and vote on. So any further discussion on that amendment? We're looking for, information from the planning board on impact. All right, so voting on the amendment, those in favor of that amendment say aye.
Aye.
Paloma?
Aye.
Aye. So anyone opposed? Okay. So now we have the main motion as amended, which has a section on looking for information from the planning board on an annual basis.
Correct.
Any other discussion on this topic? Okay. Are we good to vote? Okay. So all in favor of adopting local law number 5 concerning minimum parking requirements, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay. Paloma?
Aye.
Okay. So I think I've count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 1?
Correct.
Okay. And again, Pam is excused. All right, so thank you. And thank you, Natalie. Yeah, I think that's it, right? The next item is just a referral?
Just as an informality, is there a timeline that we can commit to picking back up the conversation about addressing the broader parking needs? Sorry, broader non-parking needs?
Yeah, I would just direct that to Natalie. I know, Natalie, you've kind of got a list that you're working through, so let's figure out where that fits in the list, all right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. All right. I really appreciate you being on. Again, we don't need her for the referral, is that right?
Correct, do not, nope.
Okay.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. So the next one is a referral. So we're just referring proposed local law 8, which is concerning the Fishkill Creek Development District, to the City of Beacon Planning Board and also to the Dutchess County Planning Board. Can I get a motion and a second on that?
And scheduling a hearing for August 19th.
Oh, I'm sorry. And scheduling a hearing for August 19th. Can I get a motion and second on that?
Motion?
Second.
So I think it was Molly and Amber? Okay. Any discussion on that? And again, it's a referral to the 2 planning boards and then also scheduling a public hearing for the 19th. All right, all in favor of such a motion, say aye.
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 And Paloma?
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? Great. And then the last one is an item that has been discussed in executive discussions, and that one is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a settlement agreement with St. Andrew and St. Luke Episcopal Church. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion?
Second.
So that was Molly and Dan, and at this point, I would ask Nick to explain what we're doing here and what we can discuss publicly.
Thank you, Mayor. So this concerns the litigation about the parking lot in connection with the Tompkins Hose Fire renovation house renovation project being constructed by the city. The city is the owner of that parking lot. When the city commenced construction, the church commenced litigation claiming that it had certain rights on the property. The city disputed those rights. There's been extensive discovery and motion practice. There have been some settlement conferences with the court, and at the most recent settlement conference, there was overtures made and discussions among the parties with the assistance of the court that resulted in a settlement. The judge has directed that we report back to him tomorrow as to whether the parties are in agreement with that settlement, and if so, the settlement papers will then be executed and signed by the parties and filed with the court, and they'll then become a public document. Because these were settlement discussions and they're not in public until approved by all parties and signed, I'm not at liberty to disclose the exact terms. The council is familiar with the terms. We've had communications on those. I've been advised that the church, while they have not signed the documents, as the parties are still finalizing them, that the church plaintiffs have agreed to the settlement, and now we need, whether the city council consents to that settlement, it needs to be done in public. And once the settlement is finalized and signed by the parties, it then becomes a public document, and those terms would then be able to be disclosed to the public.
Okay. All right, so with that explanation, any discussion? Okay. And again, this is authorizing the mayor to execute the settlement agreement, so this is council approval. And again, once all the parties have gotten their approvals, we'll go back to court, right?
Correct.
And settle this. So all in favor, and again, we don't need a
Sorry,
roll call.
I have one question just about if the settlement is agreed to, members of the public want to see the details, how can they get access to that?
It would be through a FOIL, or it's actually will be available on the New York State court system public records.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so all those in favor of authorizing the mayor to execute a settlement agreement with St. Andrews and St. Luke's Episcopal Church, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Paloma?
Aye.
All right, anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. So now I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 15th.
Motion.
So Molly.
Second.
And Dan. Any changes or questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the minutes of July 15th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? And Paloma.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, this is the second opportunity for public comment. If you had not made a comment in the first part, this is your opportunity to do so, seeing no one in the physical audience, and I'm assuming, Ben, no one in the online either?
No hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. Let me announce the next meeting. That will be on August 19th. That is a Monday. There will be a workshop at 7, and then a meeting that we would project would start at 8 p.m. At this stage, I would look for a motion and a second to go into executive session regarding personnel, and then to come out of executive session, conduct no further business, and to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Amber and Jeff.
And Paloma, do you have a link for executive session?
I do, thank you.
Very good.
All right, great. All in favor?
Sorry, just a quick point. Did you announce the second public comment or opportunity?
Yes.
You did, okay.
Right. So all in favor of that executive session and then to come out and adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. Paloma?
Aye.
Great. See you all in a few minutes. And for the public, thank you very much and have a good evening.
Record.